Hi everyone, it's DM Captain Obvious here on chess.com, and I've just been paired in the 15 plus 10 pool with vrz182226. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and have a Vienna game on board. Let's go ahead and hit him with the Vienna Gambit. You should take the pawn and play g5 here. That is the best way to play for black. D6 is a little too passive in my opinion. White gets some pretty easy plans and then can utilize a timely f takes e5 and have a ready-made attack coming against f7. Whereas after pawn takes f4 and then g5, after knight f3, you have kind of a king's gambit-like position, but you're very happy with black and probably better. But I like to throw this f4 move in these knight c6 positions to imbalance things pretty quickly. Looks like I've caught VRZ off guard here. One of the things that can happen when players are caught off guard with f2, f4 on move 3 is they try to come up with a way to avoid taking the pawn. They're worried that there's some kind of deep theory or knowledge that can get them into serious trouble. But the reality is that if you just take and play g5, black is better. Knight f6 is a very common mistake in these positions. You see it all the time at ratings even higher than 10-19. Knight f6 allows me to play pawn takes e5, and then after knight takes d4, and then the knight has to move, and I get to play e5 and send his bishop, or pardon me, his knight home. And then I just have a very dominant center with a pawn on d4 and e5. This pawn that will be on f4 falls to my bishop. After knight f3, I just have a very dominant position with very easy play. And like I was saying, d6, I see this from time to time with knight f3, and then, the bishop comes out, I can pin him, and it's all still very good for white. So I do think the best course of action here is simply to take the pawn, play g5. You have plans of g5, g4, eventually hitting my knight, and see where the position goes. But VRZ is deep in the think tank. He's got a good connection, so it's not that. And that is not a good move. G3 answers this, so this check is not desirable in this position. It's basically a waste of time. I'm not worried about playing G3, and after his queen retreats, let's say that he comes to E7, I even have idea. So he goes all the way back, but I would have knight D5 hitting these points. So this is not a good move. My bishop is fine if it wants to come this way. I still don't even have to. These are two very good squares for my bishop as well. And he's just kind of not accomplished anything with queen h4. So I'm going to go ahead and just put my pieces where they want to be. And I do want to play knight f3. I don't know where my bishop needs to be yet in terms of these three squares. So we'll see what he does. One of the things that's interesting about this position is now if pawn takes pawn, I'm actually going to play d4. So if e takes f4, I'm going to meet that with d4, and he'll have an option to take another pawn. And we'll get a fractured structure, but I'm going to have a very dominant center and really great piece play, which we are going to get. So we're going to see if black senses the danger that he's in here, because he is in danger. If he goes pawn grabbing, this position can get nasty really fast for him. For instance, something like d5 comes to mind in that position, kicking this knight away, and he's not gonna have anything going on in this position. His knight has, so my knight offsets his knight. Knight e7 just blocks in development, and knight b4 doesn't accomplish anything. He might actually just want to play knight b8. And we're going to see kind of a... Okay, so he does choose e7, which I think is not great. Now my rook is going to generate pressure, have a half-open file, and I'm going to just potentially at a good moment play e5 and just completely take over the center of the board, which he does sense is a problem, and plays d6, which frees the eyes of his light square bishop and starts to contest the central squares. That all being said, this position is still very bad for black. Pawn up notwithstanding, this is just a very unpleasant position, I would think, to try to play. And now I am spoiled for choice. Bishop b5 does come to mind, although because he hasn't declared this bishop, he could just meet it there. He doesn't have to do something like c6, which would be bad, of course. I imagine he wants to play bishop g4. In these positions, a lot of times when a player finds themselves out of book, which I imagine he is, their instinct is to start lashing out and trying to make really active move, which is good, a good instinct to have. It will help you improve over time, but I'm not actually convinced that bishop g4 will improve black's position or hopes whatsoever. Meanwhile, I do want to start preparing to castle queenside. So I'm going to go ahead and play bishop g5. He is not threatening anything with h6 because of this pin on his rook. So this is not an easy piece to deal with. f6 is an ugly move and would be silly. Knight f6 makes some sense. I don't know what he's accomplishing with a6. I guess he's worried about a piece landing on b5. But as we can see, black is already really cramped. His pieces are fighting for squares. Some of them have no prospects whatsoever, and his king is nowhere near getting to safety. So this position is already pretty untenable, I would think. It's maybe, I mean, just practically speaking, I'm sure there's no like forcing win in this position, but it's probably around +1. It's just really unpleasant for black to have to play this. I'm going to go ahead and just put my pieces on good squares, castle long, and I'll probably target f7 at some point. That's not threatening anything. I can actually just castle. Again, from the previously mentioned pin from the h1 rook to his rook on h8. He might have missed it. We'll go ahead and put that on if he wants to sacrifice in exchange for no reason. But this is just a very unpleasant position. Black struggles to come up with anything constructive to do, and we're starting to see a big reason why queen h4 and then queen back to d8 is just a tremendous waste of time. So we do get to see him bring his bishop to g4, which, again, I don't think does anything. My bishop can come to e2, break the pin on the knight and the rook, and then I can put a rook, probably might swing my rook to f1 and start getting to work. Although I might want my rook on e1, actually. Maybe I actually do want to play rook e1 and play for e5 and just open up the center. That seems like another good plan. In fact, that might be more direct, which I like. Yeah, I do like that. Bishop e2 is also good, but maybe I actually do want my bishop eventually to come to h3, especially if he, I don't think he will, but if he played bishop takes knight, queen takes, and queen d7 in that order, trying to castle long, then I would have bishop h3 trickery, pinning his queen to his king. He would have to play f5, and, in that kind of position, I'm much better. So, I don't think he's more likely to play queen d7 now than bishop takes knight, but let's leave our options open, because this might end up being useful if he's trying to get his king to the queen. So queen d7, very logical. He wants to castle and get out of there, but now we do hit with e5, and the position is going to open. I think he should just castle here. He should just castle and say that I don't actually have anything decisive because I don't see anything decisive. I think that's a fair thing to say as black. Just castle long and try to figure out this mess on the king side as things happen. Taking the pawn would be pretty terrible. It allows knight takes. Yeah, so he does castle. He's playing well from the bad position that he found himself in. But I am just probably going to take. This knight is pinned. What is my follow-up here? Let's think. So if queen takes, keeping this pawn in front of his king, I think then I can drop my knight here, and I'm threatening a big old fork. And this pawn can never move. Let's see here. I'm also hitting his bishop, which is unpleasant for him. In fact, what does he do if queen? That seems pretty bad for him. So what about pawn takes? If he takes with the pawn, then his king is vulnerable, even if it runs to b8 at some point, because he's played a6. There would be some serious dark square weaknesses around his king. And this is still a mess on the king side for him. Is there anything else I need to be considering, though? Something like rook h4, trying to prompt him to give up his bishop? Nah, that seems silly in a stretch. This is just so direct. If we see queen takes, which I think we will, then knight e5 is the move. I'm not sure if pawn takes pawn is actually better. It seems counterintuitive, and it does make a lot of weaknesses around the king, but having a pawn here controls the e5 square, which I think black should have considered longer than he did, because the long-term ramifications of controlling these squares might outweigh the bad pawn and fractured king side, because this move is very hard to meet. In fact, he's going to have to play bishop f5, I believe. The bishop being protected by the knight, hitting my queen. And after bishop f5, I'm going to swing my queen to f3, and I'm going to just continue putting pressure. It's just one of those positions where we're going to see that a lot of the play is mine, and black is going to have to react a lot to the threats I'm going to create. It's difficult to play these sorts of positions when you're so cramped with black. Some people like these positions. They'll happily go into openings where they're cramped, but it's not something I find myself enjoying. The bishop is hit. So if he's not going to play bishop f5, and he plays something like knight, well, no, he can't really defend it, because if knight f6, then I just get my fork. So, and of course a move like h4 still gives up a fork, but it also allows me to take the bishop free of charge, because again, we still have this pin on the h file. So not a whole lot of choices for black that are appealing. I think bishop f5 is pretty clearly the desirable move here, insofar as anything can be desirable in such a position. There's a lot to be said about playing the Vienna Gambit, I think, from the white side. It's not one of the more popular gambits, because almost every, expert player and above will understand to take the pawn and play g5, and then you just have a worse position with white. But it's so deadly at club level and below, because there's just so many ways for black to go wrong and just have a terrible position. So if you are below 2000 rating, and especially below 1800, I would say this is definitely an opening worth looking at with 1e4, 1e5, e4, e5, and knight c3. There's just a lot of ways you can end up with the dominant center, or with a big attack, or black just blunders away a game very quickly in these positions. And if you got into chess because of the King's Gambit, which a surprising number of people do, the romanticism of the e4, e5, f4 immediately, then this also will be right in your wheelhouse. So I think it's a great. It's definitely a great opening. So he's going to give me a fork. And not actually this fork. I'm actually talking about rook e4 as the fork, which hits his queen and his bishop. So we have a lot of forks in this position. Call me a salad bar, because I have a lot of forks. That was terrible. I am sorry. No, I'm not. Yeah, I think that's game over. Black is probably going to have to resign here. If he finds bishop f5, which pins my rook to my queen, and he's saying I can't take his queen, I then actually have bishop h3, which is a really saucy move. So here and then here, which pins his bishop to his king, and then renews the threat on his queen. And assuming his queen moves, I have another pin happening here on his knight and his rook, and I still have this fork on f7. So super tactical, but pretty direct. I imagine if he finds bishop f5 after bishop h3, we should get a resignation. Pretty cool position, actually. Yeah, queen b4. I don't know. Just a blunder. Just a blunder. But it's a difficult position to handle. And as I mentioned in the opening, a lot of players, when they're caught on their back foot, they're in an unfamiliar place, all their pieces are cramped, they try to lash out. This is a lashing out move, trying to get some kind of facsimile of activity. But realistically, because I have the central space, because I have all the squares under control for my pieces, all the tactics are pretty much going to favor me. And this is just kind of a foundation of just middle game strategy. If you control the squares, you're going to dictate the pace of the game. That's why it's okay to sacrifice a pawn in terms of a speculative sacrifice in a lot of gambits, because you can get these positions where you have all the play and the initiative, as black is finding out here. And he'll never ever have time to play this and fork my pieces. So there's just nothing for me to worry about in this position. Pretty clean one, I think, from start to finish so far. Maybe he makes me convert. Maybe he makes me play to checkmate, which is totally fine. In fact, especially for someone who's learning the game, I think there's a great value in making your opponent prove the position, and also you can review the game afterwards and learn from your opponent, especially if they are playing at a higher level. There's a lot you can take away from these games. So he does play queen a5, no bishop f5. I was kind of hoping we'd be able to see bishop f5 and then bishop h3, but this is good too. We're just up a clean everything. Yeah, the position is ours, the piece is ours, the center is ours, the attack is ours. It's good. It's a good position. Unless you're VRZ, then it's nothing about the things I said are enjoyable or good. Or if you're VRZ's mom or his family, or anyone who likes him, because then this is sad. But if you are neutral, or if you like me, then this is very, very good. That is another lashing out move. It opens up his rook, though. I don't think I'm missing any kind of attack on my king. That's not enough. There's not anything. So we're just going to take the material. And it's actually even hard for him to develop this now. We still have this and this. Yeah, I actually might have checkmate here. Let me just double check some things. So immediately queen d7 comes to mind, not even recapturing the knight. Um, is queen d7 leading to checkmate? I also have to look at queen f5. Oh, queen f5 is better. It wins the queen. And I don't have checkmate in this position, but after queen f5, now his king moves and then knight check, and then in that position I win the queen. So let me just make sure. Yeah, there's nothing to that. No sacrifices. Yeah, this is best. And we're going to win the queen. And there might even be a forced mate once I have my queen on a5. But this is... And like I was saying, once you have all the activity in the center and all the piece play, all the tactics are going to line up for you. So, yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and go to the game report feature. Yep. So I think that game went. I don't think there's any major improvements that I felt during the game. If I missed anything, we'll find out here. Apparently, I did miss some things, judging from just a glance at the accuracy. There were some good moves. Then 3 inaccuracy. So I guess there are going to be some things that I can take from this. I felt like it was very smooth, but as we can see from some of the valleys in the graph, there are some improvements for me to make. All right. In any case, let's go ahead and kind of look through this. So again, this is book. The position I kept referring to is this one. And this is very, very good for black. And probably the biggest reason why you don't see this played at the top level. The play is very direct. And h3, h4, I believe, have been tried here. The bishop out has been tried here. I forget what it's called. There's some sacrificial King's Gambit line, Wild Muzio or something, where after you give up this knight, so that you can like play bishop c4, castles, and then queen takes after you give up the knight, and the full piece is given up for really rapid development and attack. I'm sure all of these things have been tried. Yeah, h4, d4. Wow, with good results. How about that? Wow. And bishop c4, of course. I wonder if, yeah, castles. 9 times we've got this position. Hamp Muzio Gambit. Yeah, that's normally in the King's Gambit, the Wild Muzio. But fun position that can arise. So things can liven up very quickly in spite of the relatively modest knight c3 on move 2. I think it's very much worth knowing for a lot of players. And it's also very transferable to some of the other common openings. Playing a closed Sicilian, for instance, is fine. e4, c5, knight c3. So it's a sturdy move to look at, especially for players that are looking to get an early attack against e5 structures, but don't necessarily want to fall into a lot of the mainline stuff that happens in the King's Gambit. So let's find, yeah, this is not a good move. Straight mistake. g3 is never a problem. Maybe, yeah, it's not surprising that the computer wants to just grab material, but I'm very much happy to put my pieces on squares they want to be on. I guess one of the reasons that this would be good is I actually talked about this. If once this knight ends up on e5, I always get d4. So in these positions, d4 makes a tremendous amount of sense. And again, we get a very dominant center. This does, now that I'm looking at it, and I talked about it, this is also very good. And inarguably better than what I did, but I'm not upset with how I played that. I think knight f3, though, this is not as good. I think it created a lot more practical issues for black. Well, not more, but different issues for black. This is also a very good position. But yeah, we went with knight f3 and sacrificed a pawn, which I kind of was jonesing to sacrifice a pawn. Not gonna lie, I kind of went in hoping that I would get a chance to do that. I really enjoy getting active play, so I was happy to get this. Just recapturing immediately, I guess, is slightly better, but I'm not too bent out of shape about d5. Knight b8 is what the engine is recommending, just coming all the way back, which is a sad move to play, and it's not entirely shocking that black did not want to do that. Yeah, and we were able to utilize that h-file. He wasted time with h6. Overall, I'm very pleased with how this turned out. No real constructive plan for black comes to mind here. And here I'm just trying to castle and get my pieces to good squares. Queen d4 does make sense as being slightly better. It doesn't block the bishop in. I wanted the queen to defend my knight laterally. I was anticipating bishop g4, which we got, but I guess bishop e2 was always going to be an answer to that. And the queen on d4 exerts even more pressure on his mess of a king side. So I understand why queen d4 is slightly preferred to queen d3. Yeah, and as mentioned during the game, this was never going to be a bother to me because we have the unusually opened h-file. Normally, you don't get that so quickly in these games. Castling, everything. Rook e1 is inaccurate. Okay, so bishop e2 is the move. I kind of fell in love with this plan of just opening up the center, trying to open up the center and get after his king. It did pay off, but bishop e2 is the top choice, and then just grind this position out. And again, all the play is going to come from the white side. Black is executing one of the few plans he has, and it's not even a good one. So, you know, if we got this position here, e5 without being supported, that actually does make a lot of sense. I do get an improved version of what I did. Okay. Yeah, so I guess rook e1 was pretty superfluous. My rook is good on d1. It's putting pressure. I can respect that analysis. Of course, an engine is going to be much sharper than I am, but looking at this, it does make a tremendous amount of sense just playing e5 here. If he does try to go for something where he prevents me from capturing, I actually do in this position have e6, taking advantage of the lack of harmony in his position, where in these sorts of lines, this is just, and now the light squares are atrocious. Oops, not there. Bishop takes. That's much better. Yeah, sorry about that. The light squares are atrocious. If he tries to castle, for instance, we're just gonna, I think either one is fine. Knight d5 it likes too. Wow. I think there's a lot of good moves here. I'm spoiled for choice in these positions as well. So let's go back to the game. Rook e1, not ideal, but here it doesn't like e5. It does like f6 as a reply. That is a very, or not f, it likes f. What is going on? Queen f5. Really? And it's that much of a throwaway. Queen d7. Bishop g2. Bishop g2. So after this, queen f5. Queen takes f5. Really? Why do I have to take his... Oh, because he's threatening to take and take. I imagine. So like if I try to decline though, can I do this? No, it just drops a piece. It just bluntly drops a piece. Yeah, that's just ridiculous. Yeah, okay. Oops. Well, another oversight that is a good learning moment. Queen f5, very nice. And yeah, it drops it to just the slightest of edges for white. I missed this. I kept looking at lines with bishop f5, where I felt that in these lines I'm gonna always have really, really good play. Queen d4 is recommended, but this was never going to bother me. But I never considered queen f5, looking to trade queens and take advantage of the fact that my bishop hasn't started defending this knight. So that's very educational. That's good. I missed that idea. So castling obviously is a mistake in that line. Taking is good. And here I do think, yeah, taking with the pawn, as mentioned, controlling specifically the e5 square was best. And that makes a lot of sense because now knight e5 is just very, very, very difficult to address. A lot of things are being hit by the knight directly or threatened to be hit by the knight. And this is where we got a lash out move. Queen b4 didn't make any sense. And now I've got just my salad bar of forks going on. So that was not even the best move. I think this is fine. Knight takes g4. Knight takes g4. Oh, wow. Knight takes g4 and h3 is the threat. Because if queen takes knight, then bishop h3. Wow. And we had talked about something similar during the game. Whew. There's so many tactics in the position to consider. Yeah, so just taking this bishop is also really good. Well, rook e4 is still close in the evaluation, although obviously taking the free bishop makes sense, giving black the opportunity as well to make a very, very understandable blunder with queen recaptures. The whole point of queen b4 likely was to recapture, so it's very likely he would have fallen for that. But yeah, queen a5 is just everything is starting to come undone. Not much to say, just blunders. I don't think there's a forced checkmate with queen d7 and then king b8. I didn't see a follow-up in this position. I mean, I'm obviously much better, but win a rook, win material. It just didn't. It didn't feel like it was the best option I had, especially when you see the very, very simple end to the game right here, and then what we got, where the queen hangs. Yeah, and this is where VRZ resigned. But so definitely this is very fair. Those inaccuracies all had some very reasonable things in terms of how I can improve my play in these sorts of positions. If we head to the details, we can see time. So my average time a move was not black, was 23 seconds. And I actually mentioned this in a prior video that I actually have this weird thing where what is it? Jennifer Shadahay once said, "Long think, wrong think," and I have often missed ideas that I need to see, or I get infatuated with one line or a couple of ideas, or I just talk myself out of a good move. And I'm actually one of the oddities that is more likely to be inaccurate when I spend more time on a move, although this is also weighed down by some of my obvious recaptures and simple tactics in this particular game. But here we see for our opponent, his average time a move was 41 seconds. And in spite of having a very excellent record with quicker moves, he struggled to come up with the right plans on longer things. And this is going to be more common, I think, for players still learning the game. It's difficult to find a right balance between how much time you should spend on a position and playing the best move you see. 15 minutes is probably the shortest time control that I would recommend for someone learning the game. The more time, the better. Just really get into your own head and develop pattern recognition and positional understanding through playing games 25, 30 minutes or more if you can. It's harder to find those online, but it's also tough because in these 15-minute games, you spend a couple minutes on a position and you start to feel the clock. You start to feel like you need to make a move because you don't want to lose on time. But in reality, the stronger and stronger you get, the more you realize 5 minutes is going to be plenty of time. There's no need to panic. Try to find the best moves and ignore the clock would be my advice if I could talk to VRZ. Obviously, there were some things I could improve on as well in terms of accuracy and tactical vision, which I believe under themes we might see. Aha, pins. Yeah. I missed some ideas involving pins, and so did my opponent. Overall, pretty smooth. We can see that most of the differential issues are going to come on his side as the game slipped away, which makes sense. A good amount of green stars. That is what we want to see. Excellent moves. Some mistakes, things we already looked at. And we did get a chance to look at the opening book as well. So overall, a good game. Some good moments for me to take as well in terms of executing a winning position cleanly. But also just general advice for playing these positions, especially when they're unfamiliar for a player, and a nice little game to show how an early f4 can throw your opponent off kilter. So I hope you enjoyed the game. Good luck with your chess out there, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.